Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight's meeting of the Westerville City Schools Board of Education. The agenda will be displayed on the screen in the front of the room. You may also follow along by connecting to the district's website, wcsoh.org. Click on a district link, then select the Board of Education, then Board Docs Agenda, and then select this evening's meeting. There will be two opportunities to address the board this evening, the first being Agenda Item 6.01. The first set of public comments is relative to Agenda Items 7.01 through 12.01. Please state the agenda item that you are referencing at the beginning of your comments. The second opportunity is the second opportunity is Item 13.01. The public comment section, this public comment section is for items not on this evening's agenda. There is a sign-up sheet located on a table in the back of the room. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to address the board. We are really glad that you all are here. And with that, Mr. Griffith, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Byrd? Here. Dr. French?
Here.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Here.
Mr. Velardo?
Here.
Mrs. Davidson?
Would you please join with us and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We move to Agenda Item 3.01, and at this time, I would like to invite Jennifer Anden of The Ohio State University to present an environmental award to the City School District. Please come forward. Thank you. You are welcome to be at the podium if you'd like, so that way you have a microphone and people can hear you.
Sure.
Is that all right?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you for being here tonight.
Again, my name is Jennifer Anden, and I'm very, very pleased to be back in the district. I actually graduated from Westerville North back in so it's very, very exciting. Again, I work for the Department of Entomology at The Ohio State University. And to just give you a very brief history of why we're here tonight and why we're presenting this award, back in 2012, we actually received a grant from the U.S. EPA to implement integrated pest management into 5 school districts throughout Ohio. And we were actually in cooperation with Indiana University, and they were going to do 5 districts in their state as well. So in doing so, we selected our 5 districts, and Indiana selected theirs. We were also working with the IKE, which is Improving Kids' Environment, and Mr. Alan Wilson, who is the IPM coordinator of the Westerville City School District. And he, along with Kenny Nichols and Laura Eininger, if I could have the 3 of you come up here, please. They were paramount in assisting OSU and IKE in teaching the schools the rules of IPM, how it should be implemented, and basically how to reduce pests and pesticides in the district in the safest way possible. So with that, I would just like to say that Westerville City Schools has been an exemplary model for us to use as we have taught these other districts how to implement integrated pest management into their districts. And it takes a whole slew of people, we know that, and it's buy-in from every level there is, all the way down to the kids, all the way up to administrators and the superintendent. So we've certainly appreciated everything that you've done. Alan Wilson and the Westerville City School District received their School IPM Award back in 2008. And since then, Alan has taught us and many other people at Ohio State, and working with all of their folks, have taught us the ins and outs of integrated pest management. He is the bug man. But we'd like to recognize Westerville City Schools for their continued implementation of an integrated pest management in their district, but also helping to serve as a model for the rest of the state. We've also, in one of the districts that we've been working with under this grant, we've actually been able to grant Western Reserve City Schools the IPM Star Award as well. So Alan Wilson was the first to get it for Westerville City Schools, and with his help, we were able to get the IPM Star Award for another school district in Ohio, which we are all very, very proud of. So with that, I would like to say thank you very, very much on behalf of The Ohio State University, Improving Kids' Environment, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Thank you very, very much, and this is an award to recognize you for all of your hard work and contributions to IPM throughout the state. So thank you very much. Alan Wilson. Thank you very much, Laura Heininger. Thank you.
Do we really need to get up there and
Sure.
Thank you,
That
my
sounds
pleasure.
like a really worthwhile project, and the fact that we are doing some leadership in that, thanks to you all for your part.
Absolutely.
Thanks
It's
a
been a
lot.
privilege to work with these folks.
Thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
For being here tonight and for helping another school district get this.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
It's really
We're the first ones in Ohio to get the Star Awards.
Yeah, it feels really good. Good old Westerville North.
That's all right. Thank you. Then get over here. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here tonight. And I was sharing that not only was that award for us, but we were able then to help another district to move forward with that award. And I think that's really neat. So thank you all for doing that. Moving on to 4.01 is really the discussion, to see if there's any discussion regarding the minutes from our meeting on February 9. Does anyone have any items to share, any discussions, any thoughts on that?
The only question I had as I read over the minutes, there was under 5.01, the all-day kindergarten note, then motion and approved option 2, and monthly tuition rate of $300 with a sliding scale for the fee schedule. And that I wasn't totally clear on, that we have voted that way. I thought we were voting $300 for everybody, but now there is a sliding scale. Can someone explain that a little bit?
I'm going to do that in the
Oh,
superintendent's
you're in,
update.
the- okay. So you have that for your superintendent's report? With the sliding scale, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And anybody else have any comments or thoughts on that? And I know, Dr. Kellogg, you are going to be addressing that tonight. So thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
We move forward then to 5.01, to the superintendent's report. Dr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Rolado and members of the board. Been busy couple of board meetings, so I thought I'd take a moment to breathe in and kind of update on a couple of the things that are moving forward. Most importantly, all-day kindergarten. It's been a busy 2 weeks with 2 days called for snow for the kids. But been going at it pretty good. So at the district office, we have a core planning committee for all-day kindergarten that's been working on all the implementation pieces, make sure we don't fail to turn over any rocks, to make sure we've got everything covered. The planning team includes people from curriculum, HR, transportation, food service, facilities, just about every facet of the organization you could hope to have at the table, because we want to make sure we're not missing anything. I know within that, Mr. LaRose and his team have already visited Longfellow and gone through the facility to make sure that we got everything covered. These are when you learn things about grease traps and wash bucket closets that you didn't know you had to think about when you're reopening a school. Everything down to phone systems and IT, intercom systems in buildings, bathrooms, everything you need to look at. Transportation routes, all the little pieces that when we say yes to doing something, then it's all the little things that it takes to get things done. So we've been meeting, we've had 2 meetings. We meet once a week. have a planning tool we're going through to make sure we got all our bases covered. So a couple of things to update you on. First of all, the first piece is, I think one of the first actionable items the board's going to see is we're going to post a principal position that's related to this. And what we would, if you remember on the presentation, we had indicated a 0.4, I've forgotten what the fund number was, about $35,000, I think, for administrative coverage. What we're going to do to save the district some money, currently, we have an administrative position between Emerson and Hanby. It's Jan Federico, that we had Jan working with staff there as we were in the implementation of bringing the magnet schools back up to speed. We'd like to take that FTE and reallocate it from the curriculum department to be a principal position. That position would have responsibility for, make sure I say the right building, Emerson and the all-day kindergarten at Longfellow. And that would leave Monica Brown, who's a current principal of both, being principal for Hanby only. So she'll have that responsibility. We're finding it kind of kills two birds with one stone. It's been a bit of a challenge trying to manage both programs for one principal. And we think that this is a little bit more manageable model. Like we did with the magnets when we said we'd keep an eye on how that goes, we'll do the same here. So first thing you'll see is we're going to post that position, move that FTE over, and look for someone to fill that role. And then we'll have some leadership there as we start building the other staff positions behind it. So that helps the economic model that we had, the budget model we had for the all-day kindergarten program. Give us coverage of both. So that'll be the first thing. Two, we are working on the lottery components, thinking through all of the little pieces that have to happen, and we've mirrored that around the magnet open lottery system. So we'll see some of the same components in place. So you'll see answers to questions in the FAQ document that's gone out there that we are anticipating. Example, what if you have a family with twins or triplets, or I don't think worse would be the right word, better than triplets, multiples of the same, who, if you pull their name out of the hat, do I got to split my kids, or do they all get the opportunity? So we're working through those kinds of questions as well that we're bringing to ourselves. So it's the beauty of putting a lot of people in the room. The strange questions come out, and we look for responses. So we're working on those components. I know there was questions, some other questions that you may want to have for me tonight that are be part of that as well. So we're working on the lottery piece. We'll have that ready. We have a little more breathing room there. The most complicated piece is the teacher staffing component of all this, because you have, let me back up. We're going to continue to monitor the numbers of applications that come in for all-day kindergarten, whereas we anticipate having enough applicants to fill the projected 260 spaces. If we don't want to have hired a bunch of teachers for positions we then don't have. So as we've looked at it, in our mind, 300 is the magic number. We feel at that point, if we have 300 applicants for all-day kindergarten, at that point, we feel like we're in position to fully staff all 10 classrooms, and that we're not going to have enough changing of our mind at that point to reduce that and leave ourselves hanging. So we're using that number as the magic point for saying, okay, full blast staffing. 6 of those teachers will be in current schools. 4 of those teachers would be at Longfellow. And those are different staffing patterns. For example, currently, if there was, for example, a second grade opening at Huber Ridge, one of the first things that would happen is an internal voluntary transfer. So a teacher and a principal have a conversation and say, I know you're teaching X grade, you'd like to move to this grade, I'd like you to do that, we'll move you there. Now the grade level changes, that's open. So the same thing could happen here. There may be a kindergarten teacher at one of those schools who teaches 2 half-day sections, who expresses interest in the all-day at that school, or a first grade or a second grade teacher. So that would be phase 1. That will then have a ripple effect as to what other kind of openings we have at grade levels. And then we still have to fill the 4 seats at Longfellow. And we're going to continue to look for opportunities not to hire additional staff, but to look to reassign staff that we have in positions where we think we can readjust the allocation. So a lot of moving pieces in there to make that all happen the right way. So we're working on that one, and we've been, Rhonda Gilpin from WEA has been really fabulous in working with us through some of those issues, making sure that we're doing it in a way that meets the expectations of the employees and their contract and with past practice. So I appreciate her support and feedback on that. So that's the third component. So we talked about principal, we talked about lottery, talked about staffing. The fourth component is the sliding scale and tuition. So we looked at a couple different models for sliding scales and ended up in just saying the easiest and most transparent thing for us in the community is using the sliding scale that's already built into free and reduced lunch, which is a sliding scale of income to family size. So depending on your income and family size, the threshold mark for whether or not you qualify for free and reduced lunch changes. So, for example, I think it's at a family size of 4, a household size of 4, I think the sliding scale to eligible for free and reduced lunch is $30,000, something like that. It changes along that. So we think for a couple of reasons. One, we already have the paperwork and the data, so it's an easy processing piece. It's no additional processing by staff to have to look at other paperwork and calculate. It's an easy thing for families to turn in. They're doing it, many of them are doing that anyway if they think they qualify, so that process is already in place. And it's an easily understood benchmark for everybody that's coming into the system. We looked at whether or not we would differentiate between someone who qualifies under free versus someone who qualifies under reduced, and opted not to. Going back, we felt looking at the community's response and strategic planning to access to district-level programs, this is a district-level program that we want to have fair access to. We didn't want tuition to be, or transportation, to limit access. Transportation already has somewhat of a limit because if they opt for, if they don't get in, if their home school doesn't have all-day kindergarten, then that place won't be an option for them. If they don't get Longfellow, the only other option is a building, not their home school, where they would have to transport. So that can be an access issue for some families. We didn't want tuition to be a second factor in that. And their budget model we shared with the board, that 60-40 split in projected revenue, that's all based on that same concept. Right now, we run at a little bit over 35% of our elementary families. We actually have a higher free and reduced lunch percentage at elementary than do at secondary. So that 40% number was our effort to say, if we applied it this way, how do the numbers work out? So we felt for year one, that was the easiest, quickest way to apply sliding scale and determine the tuition base. A lot of other ways you could do it. I'm not particularly opposed to those. One of them, as we talked about it, was, like I said, you could change how much someone for a reduced rate would have to pay. Okay, then the question becomes, well, what's the right number? Is it? And I've looked at a couple different ways of doing it. I have some of those numbers if anybody wants to look at them. So that's the sliding scale component that we settled on. And like I said, we looked at some other models and just felt like it was going to just create a logistics nightmare around something that already was sitting in place for us to use. So if you have questions about those, I'll take those before I hit my final update on Vine Street. If you want to hit anything on all-day kindergarten, questions you have, updates you'd like to hear. All right. On Vine Street, we had a meeting with the city and talked about the opportunities there. They indicated, this was city administrators, we're going to go back and talk with city council regarding the appraisal. We gave them a copy of the appraisal. We talked about use, and we're waiting to see what their interest is moving forward. I told them there wasn't necessarily a deadline, but the board was interested in moving forward, and sooner better than later would be the best answer. I haven't heard back yet. I'll probably wait another week and then give a phone call and just see where we are with an update. But that's where we are on that one. Questions for me?
Just an overall comment. I don't know how quickly you'll be able to determine our costs versus our income with this all-day kindergarten. But I'd like a report on that even before we open in September, August, whatever it is, that, we have some idea of where we are.
I
Summer,
agree.
maybe, yeah.
We'll have, one of the parts of our planning group is there will be an implementation monitoring team. So we'll put that in place. That includes some parents, teachers, and other folks. And I want to look at the revenue. And, we've got models for projected revenue and expenditures based on the numbers we have, but you just never know. And we're trying our best to kick over all the rocks and hit the undiscoverables by having everybody in the room. So the question on Friday was, anybody kicked over a rock and found an expense we hadn't, that we missed? And that's when things like grease traps and marker boards come up that we're okay on. And some good ideas came, the administrative idea about, why don't we do this and reduce the administrative cost to the program and add some value in some other places. So I thought that was a slick move. That was a nice recommendation from folks. We're looking at some other places, custodial help and clerical help there, and what would be the right level. So we'll continue to use the modeling we did for budgets to guide us, but a final report will definitely be in call. And that's part of the pilot piece, is how is it working?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your looking at different options and trying to save where you can, because obviously you're doing that, so appreciate that. Thank you. And I'm sure the taxpayers will appreciate it too. So.
We actually, on the teaching staff side, built a model. The 260 seats represents about 25% of the students in the district. So we actually worked a model where I took enrollment in the kindergarten programs at all the elementaries today, applied a 20% drop in the half-day programs, assuming that's what would come out to all day, and looked at the number of sections that would collapse by school. Mm-hmm. Assuming even distribution, right, and 20%, which is a low-end number, you can start to get a handle on how many sections of half-day will come out of the system and how many FTE does that create. So we're using those kinds of things to see, because what we would then do is convert those FTE to all-day kindergarten and offset the numbers that are coming up.
I find that helpful too, that if we could get a report of some kind as we're moving forward, how it is unfolding, cost and income. I appreciate that idea. And the two places that I know people have talked to me about, or I've heard, can you help clarify, are those, the one you've addressed, the free and reduced. And I'm sure that I should know this. I'm sure I should know this. But if a family qualifies for free and reduced, then it's really not so much a you pay on some sliding scale. It's a you don't pay at all for all-day kindergarten. Am I getting that right, or am I still not quite getting that?
Correct. The way we've recommended moving forward is if you qualify for free and reduced, which is in of itself is a sliding scale of income to
Yes.
qualify for, then you would not have tuition.
Okay, good.
If you're
good.
yeah.
Okay, and the only I just wanted to make sure I thought I had that right, is just to make sure that that we give just so much clarifying information that there's not confusion on the homeschool thing or the free and reduced piece, that and I suspect that we're unrolling this so quickly. I would say we need to, because people need to register, people need to do lottery, people need to decide what they're going to do for the fall, and all of those things need to unroll. But if we can be overly communicating, maybe, like just we'll give you more information you ever wanted to know, I think that would just be helpful.
That's a spot I should have updated you on as well, and I apologize. We have banners going to all the elementary schools with information that'll be at those. We have yard signs to place around the community to remind people that all-day kindergarten is coming. We've put stuff on the website. We have the all-day kindergarten meeting coming up. We're translating documents. We're bringing interpreters to all-day kindergarten. So we're pinpointing, Barb, correct me if I'm wrong, is Kindergarten 101 March 10th? March 10th is the two meetings for Kindergarten 101 at, again, Foss and Hawthorne, with Spanish interpreters at Faust. See, I got it right. And Somali Hawthorne with interpreters. And that's an opportunity for parents to learn more about kindergarten registration and the opportunities for all-day kindergarten. And actually set up the first thing, spread the word to the herd, the first thing you got to do is register your kid. That's the first thing you got to do. Then you can move to the opportunities to apply for all-day kindergarten.
Thank you.
Now, let me just tag on to what Mr. Velardo said. So basically, what he's saying is that there is no such thing as a sliding scale. It's all or none. They pay or they don't pay. That's what I gathered from what you said. Is that right?
The sliding scale is in the
It
free
is
and
in the-
reduced piece. So where it slides is how many people are in your family and how much income you have.
Gotcha.
So that's where the slide is. But then once you hit that, if
You
you
don't
fall
pay.
within that, then you don't pay.
Well, then.
The slide is the qualification
then-
for.
Then, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, that's helpful, though, isn't it?
But we
Yeah.
should not, that's misleading to some people, to say that there's a
I
reduced,
believe free is free,
yeah.
but if you're reduced, then you fall on that schedule. And so there's, just like with the food service we have, there's a reduced amount.
That's not the way we've been playing it. Now, the model we've been using is the sliding scale is your eligibility for not paying tuition. So if you fall free or reduced, we looked at models, if you remember, Bart, that talked about, do we want to apply for reduced? And that can be done, but at this point, we moved forward with free and reduced. If you qualify under the sliding scale, your income and your family size determines that, and that's a spreadsheet from the feds that's updated every year. That's what we applied. Part of that was trying to determine what would you charge for reduced? What would the number be? Depending on the number, the income burden on the cost burden on families, even in the free phase would be for those in reduced would be difficult. So rather than try and come up with a number, we went that way. Now that can change in the future because the board sets fees. So that can change in the future if that's what you'd prefer. If you feel that you want to bring that one back, I think we should do that quickly. But it's not that there's not a sliding scale, that is the sliding scale.
Yeah, the sliding scale is what determines if you are
Eligible.
thank you, if you are eligible for free all-day kindergarten. And that's the way I would, we're not really asking for this. I mean, I like that. I would not go along with a sliding scale payment for all-day kindergarten. It seems to me to make a lot of sense that this is the tool that we use for free and reduced lunch. So why create another tool for free and reduced all-day kindergarten? That, I think, would become a labyrinth that I wouldn't be interested in getting bogged down in.
I agree, Rick. The free and reduced is the measure that is so often used, when we're talking about anything to do with school, and it's actually kind of a proxy for poverty as we look at what poverty levels are within school-age populations. So to me, it makes sense to do that rather than stepping outside of these established bounds that families are in many ways comfortable working within. There's a familiarity with it, and our staff is familiar with it as well, so that makes good sense to me. John, I was thinking, and you've probably already done this, Greg's probably already moved in this route. When we look at the communication piece and reaching out to child care centers, we also need to reach out to the home care providers. And home care providers, there are a large number of them listed on the JFS site. So we need to go to the Jobs and Family Services site and identify those entities that offer care. We might also want to reach out to Action for Children and ask them if they can in any way assist us in getting the word out. Because one of the problems is, especially if you're looking at your only child or your oldest child, you may not necessarily drive by that school, you may not have an awareness of what's going on in the school, and so we need to hit those child care providers as hard as we possibly can with the information.
Just a couple of things. I want to talk about the financial reporting first because we've had an opportunity to have some discussions on this. I'm realizing now, I do believe that we have a miss in the meeting minutes. We read into record a quarterly reporting requirement.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, it's not captured as part of the amendment. Part of that discussion around the quarterly reporting requirement, as we've talked about it from an operational standpoint, is that requires a baseline. So, Dr. French, I think your call out is a good one. We had these discussions late last week about, in order to see how we're performing financially, we have to have a kind of a post in the road, to measure from. We talked about the revenue component of it becomes fixed as we know the results and get to, closer to 95% surety of who is taking the all-day kindergarten and how the economics of that works out. So I think, yep, go ahead.
It's here.
It's here, I can't see it.
Scroll down below 5.01.
Oh, in addition, a quarterly financial
It's
report.
the
There we go.
amended item.
Yep.
Yeah.
I went straight to the tuition rate.
Yeah.
But to the tuition rate, I guess, as we've discussed this a little bit, again, operationally or from a logistics standpoint, I'll take a little bit more of a cold calculated position on this. And that is that we have two models that we're dealing with here. The first is that we have the economics of the sliding scale and the tuition rate. The second is that for the pilot period, we're invoking a true open lottery. So the laws of probability would tell me that we're going to achieve some type of percentage balance that isn't going to sway the financials on the revenue basis so far out of whack to no income coming in for those taking the all-day kindergarten, that we have what amounts to a probabilistic hedge financially that unfortunately the concession is in order to do that, we have to have an open lottery, right? However, financially, then that gives us the option to have the sliding scale in the format that it's structured and still be able to protect the economics of this model for the first 2 years that we implement it. Like I said, that's a little bit more, math and cold hard, look at the numbers. But I think it's a fair concession to get us through the pilot period. Iterations, we look at it, we focus on continuous improvement. We see how the program's performing financially as well as from the educational outcomes that we've talked about. And then I think we can, make next set of decisions on what the next phases look like.
So initially, our thoughts are that with this open lottery, we will be okay. We're going to do a financial, lottery and financial need will come out okay, balanced, as well as we're assuming the educational need will be balanced. We're just assuming that because we have no choice when we do an open lottery.
Right.
So we're assuming both things are going to happen. So all we can do is try the first time and see how it goes.
Pretty much, yep.
I think that's part of the communication plan so that everybody knows is out there, and I appreciate those are great recommendations, Dr. Nestor Baker, and creating a financial structure. So on the other end of this, when you look at the monthly tuition, we made it an annual tuition of $3,000, 10 payments, $300, right? Mm-hmm. That seems to us from the looking at the market around us to be a pretty good price point for people. So we think those price points, free and reduced lunch and $3,000 annually, 310 payments for most families, are attractions that will bring us the kind of pool we want. So that in the end, the question about access to anybody can be answered by looking at the demographics of the population that apply and the demographics of the population that get in. If either of those pools are skewed one direction or the other, then something's amiss. We didn't want financial then to become the issue or communication to be the issue. I want to take those variables off the table as much as possible. So.
And I think the communication piece is key. I keep hearing or receiving questions about if a kid makes it into a kindergarten, will that be their homeschool, which I shared with you. So what I would say to my fellow board members, every time we receive a question, if we could pass it along to whoever's keeping track of it, to put that online too. I did go on and look at the questions, and I think they're great. And I think you heard a little bit, Barbara, a different perspective at Parent Council last week. If we can draw those parents back in, because I think they were looking at things maybe just a little bit different. And it concerns me that, we're 2 weeks in and some of the ideas that are out there are so far off base. So it concerns me a little bit.
The question I think Ms. Davidson's referring to was, if a student accepts a seat at a school all-day kindergarten, not at Longfellow, and it's not their home school, is that now my home school? And the answer is no, that's your home school for that year. Actually, it's not your home school. That's where you're attending. That's where the program is. Your home school is still your home school, and that's where your data and where you are attached to. It's similar to what we do with some of the other programs we have where kids can do that. So if you're not at your home school because of all-day kindergarten, you may not be there physically, but everything else about you is attached to that school.
And the parent was also concerned that they've already made plans for all-day kindergarten elsewhere next year. And so when their child comes back, if all those kids that are in all-day kindergarten have those spots, now will they be an overflow child? So there were two pieces to that where people are also worried about that. So
The way we're mapping out the lottery today would look something like this. And this is draft, not done. As the selection process begins, and Mark, feel free to correct me if I get it wrong, because you're the master on this one. As we walk through it, and we've walked through it a couple different times, and we'll do some more with some parents as well, your name comes out of a hat, and I say to you, Ms. Davidson, you have a seat all-day kindergarten. You're the first pick. You got Longfellow, and we'll take care of transportation. There are 6 buildings that have all-day kindergarten. If you'd like to opt for one of those buildings, you may do so rather than Longfellow. And if that building is your home building, we'll transport you because that's your home building and you're done. If you pick a building that's not your home building, that's not your child's home school, but that's where they'll go to all-day kindergarten, and that will be your transportation. And that's how it'll work. In our mind, that's how we would walk through it. Does that make sense? Okay. Makes sense to us all right now. We just got to make a computer make it do that for us.
anything else?
Anything else comes from the community or the board, send it to us. You can send it to me or Barb, and you know, any out there questions that we're not being clear on or that we're not answering, send them to us, and we will work hard. We're updating that FAQ that's posted on a regular basis. So we're just trying to be ready for all day, again, for that Kindergarten 101, and I encourage people to be there. And number 2, get your child enrolled at the enrollment center through the enrollment center so we can get you processed in. Because once the lottery goes, we're done.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. Moving on to 5.02, fiscal year 2014 audit report. And it's going to be given by Mr. Michael Howard. But Bart, do you want to?
Well, just briefly, we've asked Mr. Michael Howard to be here. He's a CPA, a longtime resident of Westerville. He's part of the audit committee. He graciously volunteered to come and give you a report from that committee. So if you, when he's done, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask him, and we'll go from there. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Is this thing on? Yeah. You know, members of the Westerville Board, Superintendent Kellogg, Treasurer Griffith, staff, and community members. My name is Mike Howard. I am a CPA, certified public accountant, and a long-time resident of the Westerville School District. I'm reporting on behalf of the district's Audit Report Review Committee. We met with the Auditor of State's representatives on a, I can assure you, very cold and windy January 9th at 7:30 in the morning. And there was a door lock that I didn't know I wasn't supposed to go through. And we discussed their draft reports on the district's financial statements, your schedule of federal awards, that's money you have gotten directly or indirectly from the federal government for your programs, compliance with laws and regulations, and your internal controls. Other members of the committee from the community are Tiffany Stubbs, and I hope I get this right because I took German, Rebecca Vasquez-Skillings, both also CPAs who attended the meeting, and Robert Edwards. Attendees representing the district were Board Member Carol French, Superintendent Kellogg, Deputy Superintendent Hershiser, Treasurer Griffith, and Assistant Treasurer Hendricks. I am pleased as both a taxpayer and a CPA to report that the auditors found the financial statements contained in the district's comprehensive annual financial report for the year ended June 30th, 2014 to be fairly stated in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles for governments. And actually, they verbally commended both the district's in-house preparer of those statements, who I believe is Ms. Hendricks, and the outside consultants, who are Julian and Grube, a Westerville CPA firm. The reports further indicated that the district's reporting of federal-based awards was fairly stated, and they had no comments on either the district's internal controls or the district's compliance with laws and regulations. They did, however, report 2 findings for recovery, which is an auditor of state administrative term, meaning money is owed to the district for some reason. And actually, district personnel found these items before the auditors did, but it is administratively easier for both you and the auditor of state, and potentially less costly for the auditor of state to report on and pursue these findings. These findings were widely presented in the newspapers a couple of weeks ago. These findings, while taken seriously, I can assure you, by district personnel, or for relatively small amounts, it is less than $10,000 out of a total wages and benefits amount of some $80 million. That's basically all I had to say. I wanted to show you 1/3 of your report. It has 143 pages, and I read all 143 pages. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. It's not as exciting as all-day kindergarten, but
Thank you, Mr. Howard. I appreciate you reiterating that the 2 issues that were brought out in the paper quite publicly were self-reported. And I don't know, Bart, if you want to cover that any more about it, but actually our treasurer found it before the auditors did.
Yes.
So,
It's been pretty widely out. If you want me to elaborate on it, there was 2 employees that basically through deception defrauded the schools, and so it's our job to go back and recover those funds that were paid.
and I worked for the auditor of state for 28 years, and I can tell you, it's a lot better for them to pursue this than for you. There's more clout, it's less cost. And
I'd just say thank you, Mr. Howard, for serving in this way, and to the others who served who may not be here, Ms. Stubbs, Ms. Vasquez-Skillings, and Mr. Edwards, and obviously along with Treasurer Griffith and other folks who served. Really just thank you for doing this kind of community work and digging through 100 some odd pages. And I'm sure that was stellar reading late at night, but
well, there's a wealth of information in those reports, and I encourage people to pick them up and read them, even if you don't understand it completely. There is a whole section at the beginning where the district presents more summarized ideas about what's coming out of those reports, and those are pretty easy reads, actually. So.
thank you.
And you're welcome for the time we spent.
I'd follow up with Rick's comments. Same thing. My thanks. I work with external auditors very frequently in the course of my career. I am always amazed at the passion and zeal for going through all that information. And my thanks to you, Mr. Howard, as well as to Ms. Stubbs and Ms. Vasquez-Skillings, and also just to call out, it is nice to see the name of an old friend of mine, Robert Edwards, participating as well. I know that he most certainly went through the numbers with
I can imagine, yes.
with a fine-tooth comb. But no, it is a great service to the district. It's very, very much appreciated. I mean, it's almost, it's just a bonus and additive to getting a good report, you know, that we were able to have members of the community be participants in this. So again, thank you.
I'm sure it's our pleasure, so it's certainly my pleasure.
I didn't get a chance to say thanks because everybody jumped in. But
Okay,
thank
go
you,
ahead.
Mike. I very much appreciate it. And
I knew Nancy when she was in high school.
that's exactly right. I was going to say how long I've known you, but I won't because it makes both of us look older than we should. But what I appreciate very much, because I have known you so long, I know the weight to put with the words that you said, and I very much appreciate the time you spent on it and the words that you said about it, because what that says to me, this is a very clear-eyed, very open-eyed look at the audit, at the processes, and at the entirety of the document. So thank you very much.
Very few large entities, and I would make you a large entity. From my experience with the Auditor of State, actually have that few of comments. And the comments you did have were actually found by your own internal controls, so that's a plus.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will share one of the things, the last couple of years, we had the Auditor's Award with distinction, and we were informed that we would not be receiving that award this year because of these two findings. And so at our meeting, I shared that with the committee, that we would not be receiving it. And Auditor Mr. Ferguson shared that because it was really through deception, that they went to bat for us, and that we would be receiving the Auditor's Award with distinction because it really wasn't our fault. And so we should be receiving that at some point.
Very nice.
So that was good news. I didn't think we were going to get it this year.
I'd like to
I
make
haven't
a
worked there for 8 years, so I can't speak to whether you get it or not, but Doug Ferguson did say that they would try to get that for you. Yes, sir.
Should we make a motion to double his pay? It's at,
That would be
They're-
much
they're-
appreciated.
Yeah, but they're-
thank you, that's awesome. Thanks
Yeah.
for saying that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Like I said, these guys were good. And just to clarify, Mr. Edwards was actually moved, was on the committee, and he's not here, so he wasn't part of this, but he was on the committee. Had he been here, we would have had him in here, but
Oh, okay.
he's moved out. So, thank you, Mr. Howard.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Howard. Okay, up next, 5.03, Spring 2015 State and District Assessments.
It's an exciting time as we go full bore into new state assessments. And I have Dr. Scott Ebrick here, who is Director of Assessment amongst many hats he wears for us. And as Scott comes to the podium, let me tell you that there isn't anybody in Central Ohio, or perhaps in Ohio, maybe in a larger region than that knows more about the nitty-gritty details of the new assessments than Dr. Ebricht. He has been a wealth of support for our staff and our students to make sure we're ready for implementation of new assessments. And this is a great opportunity to thank Scott and the staff that work with him to make sure we're ready. And there's other people as well that I'm sure Scott's probably getting on too, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point out Greg Lewis back there and his team, IT. They've been all over the place making sure that we're ready. So we've had a couple days of testing, and the reports back from buildings has been good, but it takes a lot to make that 2% happen in those classrooms this week. So thank you to all the staff members across the district who have done that to make sure our kids are in good shape for assessment. So with that, Dr. Ebrick, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. President Davidson, Vice President Velardo, members of the board, Mr. Griffith, and Dr. Kellogg. It didn't strike me quite what I was doing here today until about 2 o'clock as I was driving around following some morning testing, and I got to thinking originally when this was planned, I was to present many days after we had started testing. But the weather hit, and today was our first day of computer-based testing. And if it had not gone well, can you imagine what this evening would look like, okay, for me? Yeah. But regardless, it really went smoothly today, and I want to share with you in part why it did. I want to give you an overview of the spring tests, kind of sharing how state assessments have evolved, summarizing the technology and test administration requirements that we're under, as well as review the available resources and how we've really tried to optimize those and get those ready for our students. It's always alphabet soup when you're talking in education, so I wanted to make sure that I created a PowerPoint that could stand alone, that people could view. This will be on board docs for public viewing. So all these slides, there's a wealth of information, and I'll be straight up. Any one of these slides, with the exception of maybe this one, you literally could spend many, many minutes going over and going really in depth, and you could get lost in the weeds really quick. So I'm giving you a very broad overview, but know that, again, these slides can stand by themselves so our community can review them and get a good sense, a good snapshot of what we're doing with assessment this spring. So you'll see there the various acronyms. It's always good to keep in mind that there's actually two platforms that we're assessing and utilizing. One is TIDE, the American Institutes for Research. That is for our social studies and science piece that is developed by the state of Ohio. And then the other is our English language arts mathematics piece, which is developed by PARC, a consortium of states. Legislative updates, you'll recall that all grade 3 students will now take the Reading Ohio Achievement Assessment to keep it consistent. We took the fall OAA in reading grade 3, and we have the 3rd grade reading guarantee. And there were a number of questions how that was going to impact students in the spring. So they passed this bill, and now all students will take the OAA in reading still again in the spring. Also, though, students will take the PARC math in grade 3. So that's been a little bit confusing. People have heard they didn't have to take the grade 3 PARC in reading, but yes, they still have to take it in mathematics. This slide here, a great deal of information. You'll see here that the Ohio Achievement tests, okay, the Ohio Achievement assessments have evolved into what we call the next generation of assessments. It was developed by PARC, again, ELA mathematics, and the Ohio has developed the science and social studies pieces. On here, there's a piece here about a Senate bill which requires all students taking American history and American government to take the PARC assessment, the Ohio State assessment. And that's been a little bit confusing to families because we think of it as a test for our freshmen in graduation cohort 2018, but there are still students that have to take the Ohio State test in American history and American government. Also, you'll note down here below the actual 7 tests that students have to take this year and how next year physical science is removed and it goes into biology. The physical science portion goes into the biology end of course test. Here is a snapshot. Basically, it takes what we saw over here for our graduation cohorts, 2018 and beyond, and gives you specific information as to the various tests that they're taking. You will know that there are some students that, because of course acceleration, are taking English 2, for example, when the majority of kids are taking English 1 as freshmen, the freshman graduation cohort 2018. But there, again, there's a small number of students that are taking English 2. And of course, there are some students that have already passed Algebra 1 and geometry before they've even gotten their freshman year in high school. And those students get automatic 3 points according to the state. And again, you can get really deep into that. But if we are not going back in the past and having students that have already completed those courses take those end of course assessments. If they've already completed the course in years past, they get automatic points. So with this, there's 2 parts to the test. That's what we are in the performance-based assessments now, the PBA. That's about 75% into the year. And then we go into the part 2, which is the end-of-year assessment. That's about 90% of the year, end of the year. So that's why we're testing now, February, March, and we'll be testing again in April and May. Both of those tests, the PBA and EOY, generate a student summative score. So you have to have both in order to get a summative score at the end. The there are various issues as we go through this. I'll be talking in the obstacles that we're up against. One of the ones that we found out here even more recently is we were expecting the results back in September. The state is now saying that we're going to get the results back in November of 2015. Keep in mind that the assessments originally were basically, the reason why we're going to computer-based assessments was so that we got the results back quickly. But because of standard setting, it's the first year of the test, they're now projecting November. So I want to make sure all of our parents are aware of that. Typically, they would get results back in June. Now, again, it's November. Could it be beyond that? I'm not sure, but that's what they're telling us at this point. They meaning the Ohio Department of Education. So on Friday, with the closing of school, we had anticipated, we planned that something like that might occur. And I was very pleased with the collaboration of our administrative staff on Thursday when the students were out sled riding, perhaps on a very cold day. we were hard at work trying to figure out what a schedule might be for our students. And when school was canceled around 7:15-ish, if you will, by 8 o'clock, 18,500 emails had gone out to all of our parents with the new schedule. And I was very proud of that, and there's many things I'm proud about the way we've handled testing. But Greg V. Brands and his group being able to get out 18,500 emails within an hour of closing to our families, because we had a lot of parents and kids anxious as to what the testing calendar was going to look like. So I give big credit there to our Community Relations Department. So you'll see the testing windows. Because of the closed days, we may be able to, the state is giving us permission to extend that window a little bit, but we fully believe that with the schedule that we have, even with makeups, we'll be able to stay within these windows that you see here for testing. Those folks that go to this PowerPoint online through Board Docs, if you click on that URL there, you'll go right to the assessment calendar that was just updated on Friday. There's a lot of talk about time, and so I felt I needed to put in here the amount of time that our testing is taking. I'm all about trying to keep my pendulum in the middle, and I believe that the amount of time that we're testing right now, I'll be honest with you, I believe it's ridiculous, and we need to reduce it. And I appreciate Dr. Kellogg and his leadership working with the legislatures to try to do that. And I think we all are in many ways talking with our constituents, our legislatures, and trying to reduce the amount of testing. And here's the example of the amount of time that our students are testing for the performance-based end of year assessments. Mathematics, we want rigor. We believe in rigor, relevant type assessments. So by no means are we saying we do not want to assess students. We believe in assessment. The extent of which we're doing it is the issue for us as educators, at least for myself. So with this rigor, I believe that the questions focusing on reasoning and constructing a mathematical argument, applying concepts to real-world problems, I think is spot on what we need to be doing. So that's with mathematics. In English language arts, I love the concept of the 3 different tasks: the research simulation, literary analysis, and narrative tasks. Those questions, very much you're focusing on evidence and also analyzing sources. When my son came home from the test the first night, I asked him what he thought of it. He's a freshman taking the English 1 assessment, and his comment to me was, "Dad, we had to read a lot, I had to provide evidence, and I had to analyze a lot of sources." I have never discussed this slide with him, but I thought he picked up on exactly what they had to do. And I want to say, too, that I'm sure the teachers probably helped feed him that, but you know what? He picked up on it, and that's what he said, and that's what he said he experienced. So I appreciate the teachers preparing our kids just like that. So here's an example. This is an example of middle school and high school. You'll see there's 3 units to an English language arts session. We chose in our district to do 1 unit a day because these were new tests. Some districts are combining, for example, 2 units in 1 day. We felt we wanted to be very methodical, make sure we knew what we're doing, give kids optimum testing conditions, so we chose to do 1 unit a day. So you'll see there where there's 3 units for ELA, 2 units for mathematics. So that's why you get 5 days for 2 content areas, okay? Science and social studies, focus on sequencing events, analyzing and interpreting source materials. Again, I'll let the public continue to read through that slide independently of this presentation. So you'll see here computer-based assessments are in grades 4, 5, and 7. We wanted to make sure we were assessing in ELA and mathematics, computer-based. We wanted to make sure we were assessing in science and social studies. We believe it's not a matter of if we're giving computer-based tests, it's when. We believe that is the direction we're going. And in fact, I asked the students today, and I asked them last Wednesday when we did 1 school for computer-based tests, Charrington Elementary, just to get, we didn't want to do them all at the same time. We wanted 1 school to kind of experience that, and we put all of our resources on that first day. Worked extremely well to do that. We learned, enhanced our protocols, and invariably, every classroom that I ask following a computer-based test, I ask students, do you prefer computer-based tests or paper-based? And invariably, and this is my quantifiable study, okay? It was 80% computer-based, 20% paper-based. I thought that was very interesting. Students very much welcomed that, with the majority did, and felt confident in what they were doing. The rest you can see there for paper, pencil tests, what we're doing next year, although we're not necessarily in next year. If this continues, to what extent, I'm not sure, but we are looking to expand out beyond grades 4, 5, and 7 for our computer-based tests. We're looking at if the state permits us, like a 4, 5, 7, 8 kind of computer-based test assessments. And then the rest would be paper-based. And then the third year of our transition plan, it would be all computer-based. If, again, the state continues to go in this direction. Key differences. The old test item you'll see here, and everyone in the audience, I would assume, would recognize the old test item, what that looks like, okay? There's usually a definitive answer that you can seek and find. You'll see here, though, in the park test items, it's usually 2 parts, Part A and a Part B. Part B is kind of derivative of Part A, what you get out of that. And a lot of times, there are multiple correct answers, but yet it's how you justify it and analyze it and provide the evidence is how you get the points. So I'm not going to have everyone try to answer all these questions. I'm just giving you an overview of what the various assessments look like. In English language arts, you'll see that there's a great deal of prompts that students have to go in and read. They can actually choose various prompts and then provide evidence and analyze sources around that. In mathematics, again, you still have 2-part type questions. Just even the length of the question and the amount of reading that you have to do. I've always said that every assessment is a reading test. And you'll see here, just look at the old test item in terms of the amount of words in the text compared to the park test item, and also even into the tables and graphs. So science and social studies, I included this because you'll see the red arrows. That's an example of drag and drop. So that is a skill that our teachers have used and have shown students. And I will say that in Ohio, one of the things that they've done for us is they made it very clear in their literature that teachers cannot help students with the content on a test, but they can help with the tools. So if a student doesn't know how to drag and drop, they can show them how to drag and drop. Now, they can't drag and drop the answer for them, okay? But they can go over and show them the tool to where to drag and drop. That's a huge distinction that Ohio has permitted us to do. So I mention that because technology is a wonderful thing, but unless you know how to use it and how to know has the tool, are you really assessing what the students know? So the state of Ohio says, you know what, we're still going to know, kind of assess what they know, but we're going to help them with the tool to get the answer so that they are using it correctly. So that's a huge distinction. Again, I give some examples of American history and how the questions have changed on the new assessments. So considerations, one of the things that as we migrate towards using devices for computer-based assessments, we've had to make sure that we have technicians on site, and Greg Lewis's group has been phenomenal, and I truly would challenge any district to have a better tech group, be more collaborative than the group that we have here in Westerville. 2 years ago, when we started knowing that this was the direction, Greg Lewis and I met, and we've been planning ever since then, and we've had multiple meetings with his group to prepare us for what occurred today. And I'm proud to say we didn't have one technology issue that we could not overcome, okay? And the one area that I know we had, it wasn't on our end. And actually, we educated Park and called them, and they weren't even aware of the error, and our tech group found how to go around the workaround and shared that with Park. I challenge any other district to have that kind of a group where we not only identify the problem, but we tell them and share with them how to solve it. And it was really because of some, I could go into that really deep, but kudos, Greg, thank you. Our students are primarily utilizing Chromebooks, and in the elementary, that is all they're using are the Chromebooks. Dr. Kellogg and our teaching and learning roadmap, we we are to this point because of that process. Originally, we were supposed to have 1,200 devices by this time. We have almost 2,700, I believe, devices in the district. And that has helped us being able to utilize those Chromebooks so that we didn't have to borrow any that really from others, like the high school down into the elementary. There was really not as much shifting as we thought we might need. And at the middle school, there are going to be some desktops utilized, but the Chromebooks have actually been working wonderfully for assessment. And again, though, it's because of what Greg did prior to this, and even down to purchasing the type of Chromebooks he did and recommended. So we do have technicians in various buildings there to help out with the assessments, a huge rollout plan for that. I provided this slide because all of these are hyperlinks on the PowerPoint, so when parents go, they want to view this, they can go in, click on any of those hyperlinks, and it will take them right to various sites that they might be interested in as parents, especially around practice tests, et cetera. Terra Nova and InView, we are, because we have to keep in mind that, yes, we're still doing Ohio State tests, but we also have tests that we're doing as a local community, for example, for gifted identification. These tests are very important to our community and to our students and faculty. And so originally, we were giving the Terra Nova InView primarily in grades 2 and 6. But the issue with that is in grade 6, by the time we get that assessment results back, students are already going into 7th grade. And what we're trying to say is, let's use the assessments to place students. That's the right thing to do. So that's why we're going to do grades 2, 5, and 6 this year. Next year we'll keep doing grades 2 and 5, so that at the end of the 5th grade, we'll be able to use that data to help place kids in middle school and where they need to be, okay, for those middle school. Plus, keep in mind though, Terra Nova InView is one piece of data that I don't ever want people to think one test determines placement. There are multiple tests, there's multiple measures, but yet that is an important measure for us. We don't solely rely on the Ohio State test. We don't solely rely on the Terra Nova InView. There's multiple pieces, but this one is a large factor. So Sunday I was attending a lecture series at my church, and the speaker was, he made mention that he was on a recent flight to Wisconsin, and he was very amused by the airline captain when he came across and they were getting ready to approach some turbulence. And he tried to stay positive, and he said this: conditions are favorable for unstable turbulence. I like that. Conditions are favorable for unstable turbulence. And I thought, that's what I've been living the last 2 weeks. Conditions have been favorable for some unstable turbulence. And the reason that it's been like that is because of these implementation obstacles that we've had to overcome. And I will always remember the last 2 weeks, partly because of the collaborative efforts with our staff, that there is no way that a district could do what we've done without the collaborative efforts of our administrative team, our staff, all the way down to our aides, our custodians. Everyone has been an integral part in preparing for these tests. I'll give you an example. When we look at required resources, material, and personnel, you think, okay, let's just put some kids in there and we'll test them. Well, one, you have to have the room. And because we chose not to go on a delayed start, we wanted kids to be in school that weren't testing. We had to test in the gymnasiums, for example, at North and Central and South in the cafeteria. But when you do that, you still have to get tables and chairs. Well, you have to get those set up. Well, then that evening you have basketball practice, so you have to tear them all down. Do you see how many people play into that? But yet at the same time, we realize that there's a cost to all that as well. Device acquisition and utilization, I've discussed that. The time duration of assessments, I've discussed that in terms of, I think, the direction we need to continue to hit home to reduce that amount. The staff student training, particularly in computer-based assessments, we have been working diligently this year on preparing our staff and students, and we had voluntary workshops in the fall and in the winter for staff to come and learn. Those were very well attended. We had all of our educational technology integration specialists train all of our staff to be able to then go and show the students how to use the tools for computer-based tests, and then the teachers then train their students. So it was more like a train-the-trainer type of a model, and that was successful. And the IEP changes, our special education department, one of the changes that has occurred is we used to be able to read, for example, the English language arts directions for the assessment for students. But this year, for the Park ELA, we could not do that. You cannot read any aspect of the test unless you have a read aloud accommodation, and there's many things that have to be in place in order to do that. And so our IEP changes, for example, had to reflect that, and our special education department made sure that we were compliant on all of our IEPs going into the test. Updates from ODE Park, I still get updates daily from them. And at times, yes, I do feel like we're building this a little bit as we're going along, and I think we are in some ways. But I think our district has been a leader in this. I gave you an example earlier with the question that we found, or the coding error that we had to call Park about. I think the fact that we have 2 different platforms for testing, we've got to do something about that. Because we train on Park, and then we have to go over here, and now we have a whole nother platform that we have to train on and administer the test. That's a huge issue, I feel, for us. I think I could continue from there, but I think I'm just going to turn it over to questions now from the board.
Who's going first?
Well, I think, first of all, excellent presentation. Thank you. I think this board has expressed our concerns, frustration, irritation with the high-stakes testing paradigm multiple times. We're on record. What I find really fascinating about the last couple of weeks is I have the benefit of having a number of high school friends who are now teachers all around the state. In particular, 2 that I can think of, one in Mayfield Heights and one in Huron. And the news coming back from schools and districts and superintendents, how it's being shared in the communities is all consistent. That the Park testing paradigm, the Pearson relationship, the execution of the testing has been, I'm just going to be very frank about it, it's a disaster. It is catastrophic what it's doing to communities. We have parents that are frustrated. We're having people that are calling state legislators' office in this area and getting completely inaccurate information about what you can and cannot do related to these tests. There's no consistent communication and messaging from the state, from the ODE, from the governor's office, from the state legislatures. When we talk about, all-day kindergarten, we talk about the need for sufficient, transparent, over execution of communication, and we're in this vacuum with all of this Park testing. I think that the level of frustration in the community statewide is only paralleled and compounded by what I see as a fundamental washing of hands by the ODE and the state legislature as they've been called to account for this. And I think one of my friends at another school board in another district said it best, doing what happens all too frequently, which is washing their hands of it and pointing to local school boards, right? So I want to emphasize to parents in this community, to students in this community, to my conversation with my freshman daughter at the dinner table the other night, that we have stood firm in our opposition to this testing. And as recently as the beginning of last week, the ODE came out with a very specific statement making it very clear that school districts do not have a choice on this subject, and this is the law of the land in the state of Ohio. So I think that we're dealing with unintended consequences of a poorly executed, poorly designed, and poorly implemented program. And I'm not sure that there's anything that I've heard or I can say myself that's positive about what we're experiencing. So to our teachers that have done so much work to get through this ill-formed process and implementation, thank you. Thank you for struggling through this for our kids. You know, I don't know exactly what you say about a situation like this. Again, I will put my corporate hat on. This type of an implementation in a corporate setting would just be the end of that company, period. They would close up shop and call it a day and not be in business anymore. And I do not understand the state's reasoning and position on this subject.
We have executed extremely well despite those conditions, and I appreciate you recognizing that. Especially our staff members and our teachers that did their homework and were prepared today to administer the computer-based test, which was brand new for everybody, and they did it flawlessly.
Right, and I want to say thank you to the teachers too, because you know, if we could give the schools and the teaching back to the teachers, it would be totally different. They have been under a constraint this year to prepare students for this testing. I mean, let's face it, that's what they were all about, and they knew they had to do that. And I appreciate whatever they've done to educate our students along the way. And in regard to the frustration of parents, I'm going to bring up the question that I asked you earlier, just so the public is aware, that the parents did have the opportunity to opt out of these park tests. And in our district, did many of them do that? Can you report on that?
Well, keep in mind, Mrs. French, that the whole opt-out provision is a very, it's a lightning rod to many.
Mm-hmm.
And in our community, 64 students are not taking the test and have elected, their families have chosen that for that to occur, which is actually less than 1% of our students that we tested.
Scott, can I hit on that one for a second? So Scott gave you the numbers. Let me, and I don't mean this to be corrective in any manner, Dr. French, but clarity on this. The law says the students have to take the test. There's nothing in the law, there's nothing in ODE policy, there's nothing in our policy that says a student can opt out. We're well aware that there are organizations out there providing forms to families that say opt out. Those are not anyone's jurisdiction legally or policy-wise. Those are being created, and I'm not being critical of those organizations, I'm just saying those don't count.
But it is being done in districts other than ours, correct?
No. There is no opt-out in the state of Ohio. What we're doing, on the advice of our attorneys and ODE, and so here's a plug from my social media. If you want to follow, I put out ODE's position paper on the opt-out question on my Twitter site, which would be super_WCSD. The super has nothing to do with me. It's title, superintendent. So if you want to see that, I put that out a couple days ago. So the law, there is nothing in law. In fact, the law says you have to take the test. We have an attorney document from Bricker and Eckler, and we have guidance from ODE that says families that express to schools that they don't want their kids to participate in the testing, we've taken the position in every one of those cases. Now, Scott cited 64 cases of people who did not test. What you need to know is there were probably 100 or more phone conversations between administrators and families explaining to them the consequences from removing your kids from the test, which include this: third grade reading guarantee. If your child does not take the third grade OAA, your child is subject to a third grade reading guarantee provision on retention. Graduation from high school. One of the pathways, and this is one of the clarity pieces, but I won't get there, but one of the pathways towards graduation includes taking the 7 tests, earning 18 points. They're on a 1 through 5 scoring. Scott referenced that. So you need to earn 18 points on those 7 assessments in order to graduate. So if your child doesn't take the tests, there is no opportunity to earn the 18 points, and you may be forfeiting your opportunity to graduate. And I say it that way intentionally because there are 2 other pathways: industry credentials and a college readiness score on a college entrance exam Neither of them are very well, this goes back to Dr. Bird's concern, neither of them are very well defined yet from ODE as to what, or legislators as what they are. So in other words, if your child does not participate in the high school assessments at this point, they're rolling the dice as to whether or not they will be in a position to graduate under those other two pathways. So I don't mean to be, it's not an argument. I just want clarity for our community
Well, I
on what it
wanted
is.
clarity too. You're saying high school. So if they opt out in the elementary or the middle school.
There is no opt-out. This term is
No, I'm
widely,
talking about Park. Now, I'm not.
there is
talking-
no opt-out for any state assessment, 3rd through 8th grade or high school.
So, and just
So
real
we're
quick,
doing it,
Carol.
But we have people doing it. and
Well,
they're
no,
We have-
receiving
we have
zero.
people that are electing,
receiving
Carol,
0.
Dr. French, we have people that are electing not to take the test. I have been engaged in conversations downtown in the legislative liaison role. There is no confirmed case of any school district in the state that has architected a legal opt-out approach to this issue, because the ODE clearly says there is no legal way for you to opt out. However, I am familiar with those conversations of
Been discussed.
a couple of rural school districts in particular, that the superintendents themselves have come out and said, you are required to register to take the test, to show up for attendance, and if your child willfully chooses not to take the test, then that is fine. Same thing, I've actually seen these messages, same thing saying, the consequences are that those scores will be recorded as a 0 against the overall district score, which has consequences to the school's performance and the overall performance index, as well as the other consequences that Dr. Kellogg stated. I think that this particular piece is very, very frustrating for the whole community, because people talk about opt-out, and I agree, there are a number of different organizations that are trying to either be quasi-representational of people that feel strongly about this subject, which I obviously do, or feel that there are mechanisms to be able to bypass this that do not exist legally, and they're creating these forums to do so, and that in itself is adding additional misinformation to the issue. Again, not with the wrong intention, but there is no opt-out. And I
Well-
just think this is a badly executed series of implementations
That
and
als-
law.
I got you, but that all said, we did have 64 families that opted out.
Dr. French, to give you a little bit more salient numbers there, it's 27 in the elementary, 34 in the middle school, and 3 at the high school.
All right, thank you.
Keep in mind that the high school, you can't just think of those as graduation cohort 2018, because there were some families, for example, that have to take American history, American government, that may have chosen to do that are sophomores, juniors, or seniors.
Gotcha.
Okay?
So our position on this has been to have a conversation with the families, to make sure that they understand what the potential consequences are that I've described, mostly as it relates to their children. There's a secondary effect that Dr. Bird, Mr. Bird referred to. I just gave you an honorary PhD. You can have mine. That ties to accountability measures in a couple of ways. One, all 63 of those students who did not take tests now count as zeros in the accountability model for ODE and for our report card. All 60-something of those children who are tied to teachers whose evaluation is based on their performance won't impact their evaluation. So all of those pieces also come back to reflect on the district. And so you're in a catch-22. I've told my staff adamantly, we're not going to wrestle with parents over this issue. We'll inform, let them make their decision. On our end, we'll live with whatever the consequences are for us. But keep in mind, what we're doing is opening a door that puts a bruise to some of our accountability measures, but I'm not going to argue that point. I'll have that conversation with the legislators about where this is. I'm not arguing with people who bring us forms. I'm not arguing with agencies that are advocating for that. That's not the point. The point is, my concern is, and I said it to legislators who kept saying opt out, I said, you're making a policy reference and a legal reference that does not exist. And you're putting that, and this is what we're suffering from, in the community's mind as if it's something that exists, and it functionally doesn't under law. So again, I would drive people, it's an information on student participation in state tests. I'm happy to take, Scott and I are happy to take more questions. I don't want this to be a beat-down session on the state about testing. More importantly, as Scott's pointed out, despite all of this, we had a huge number of kids take tests last week and this week.
The students that are not testing are less than 1%.
And what we're hearing back is that the preparations we've put in place, the build-up for this, and for that big moment, when we drew back the curtain and we put the test in front of kids, we had testing situations in which kids didn't have added anxiety because we weren't on our best game, and we had prepared for whatever was going to come. And real anecdotally, as I've talked to people, the young people who are taking the test are coming back and saying, I don't know what the big deal was so far. We'll see what happens when we hit math and science, right? Hats off to staff, as everybody else has said. So I don't want to derail the conversation, but I also think might not be the right forum for us to continue on legislators and frustrations, but talk about questions that you might have relative to our implementation.
Well, and quickly to wrap up that thought, because I think it's important, the thread that you just pulled on. So let's talk about it specific to Westerville City School District, right? Our teachers, our administrators, our students have gone through the paces, regardless of the structure or the issues related to the program. We made sure we were prepared. We did what we needed to do. I also want to make sure it's equally clear that as an administration and as a board, we're not simply saying we've thrown up our hands and there's nothing that we can do and oh, poor us. I do not want the community to believe that for an instant. Dr. Kellogg has testified before the legislature. Members of this board have been very active in calling, talking to, meeting with, not just members of the legislature, but members of the state school board. You know, we are not taking this laying down. We take this very, very seriously. But in the meantime, I'm also very, very proud of this district that we still do what is necessary to make sure that our students and our community of teachers and educators do what we need to do to be able to meet these expectations. So again, my hat's off to everybody on staff, because it's a tremendous amount of work to do, and I think that you're doing a great job.
Richard has summed up the vast majority of my thoughts quite eloquently, and thank you for that. I do want to lend my kudos as well to all the staff in all the departments. There has been an immense amount of work done. You know, social media has just blown up around this entire issue, you know, with teachers and parents and all sorts of individuals from across the state talking about that. And I have time after time after time been so very proud of our Westerville folks, the way they're talking about it. We're all very, very frustrated, and in fact, I'm very angry about the position that the state has placed us in. But our people, as Richard was saying, have indeed risen to the challenge, and it's not easy at all. When I think about the amount of training, the amount of instructions, the amount of do this, don't do that, don't you dare do this, that our teachers and our administrators have had to incorporate, internalize, and put into play right now, I am awed by what they have done and the message that they're transmitting to our students. It's exactly what it should be. You know, I've been telling people, look, don't opt out, because you don't know what's going to happen to you if you do. And the zeros that your child gets for opting out, it may impact him or her more than we know, and definitely will impact the district, and in years to come will impact evaluations unfairly. Don't opt out, but don't stop fighting, because this is not an argument that any of us should back down from. Do what we need to do, adhere to the law, prepare the kids as best we can, have the best environment we possibly can, and keep fighting, because this is wrong. And I said I'm angry, and I continue to be angry, but at the same time, I'm really heartened by the fact that all across the state, urban, suburbans, rurals, I don't care where you are, superintendents, educators, parents, we are all speaking with one voice. This is wrong. So we'll do what we need to do, and we'll do it well. But at the same time, we're going to do whatever we can do to make sure we don't have to keep doing this to our kids and our staff.
Amen.
Did you say amen?
I did.
Would you stand for the closing prayer?
You want to pass the plate now, Pastor?
Sorry, wow, shifted gears for a second there, sorry. Really, all of this is just great comments, and I will just say just a couple of things. One, anybody that would listen to any of these Board of Education meetings online will know the last X number of meetings. We've really talked about this, and it's a little frustrating and so on. And I'm sure that people across the district and state listen to our meetings late at night. And we just been very clear. You know, one thing I would say about all of this, though, is I think I struggle with the breadth of testing, meaning the amount of time, but I don't struggle with the depth of testing because here's why. Because the teachers that I know in our district teach deeply. So I think our kids are learning deeply. When I ran for school board, one of the things I said was, if I could ensure that every kid got as good an education as my two are getting, I'd be thrilled. And so I think we need to keep banging away and trying to figure out the length, and it's taking time out of instruction and all that. And we'll keep banging away on that. But oh my goodness, it's just like awesome that there are times in life when you are told you need to do something, and you think it's unfair, and you think you don't have the tools to do it, and you don't think you can do it, but you rise to the challenge anyway. That's what I think this district, this staff, and our kids are doing right now. We are told we have to do this. We're not sure we have the right tools. We're not sure we have the right time. We're not sure, we don't think, but you know what? We're going to do it anyway. And simultaneously, we're going to try to figure out how to make some changes. A little piece of this, I thought this was like a tremendous report. Man, you just great information. I hope people will go online and take a look at these slides. I think we need to thank not only staff, et cetera, I think we need to thank the community. 2,700 Chromebooks now already?
Yes. Yes.
Through the grace and through the taxes and through the finances of the community coming to the fore and saying, okay, we have to do this. We're going to give the tools. Listen, I know enough about building things that I know if I have a better tool, I can do a better job. And we have placed good tools into the hands of our kids and our educators. And they have said, yeah, we think this is too much and all that, but we're stepping up to it anyway. That makes me very proud of this district and of the leadership that you and others have provided. And I think that needs to be stated very clearly. And as we go along, I hope that some of the things we can address are some of the minor pieces that seem to me to be inappropriate. You have a child with an IEP who struggles in reading, and somebody is saying, well, we're not sure you can read that out loud. Well, the overall thing will make you mad. That kind of thing will make me angry. Because then we're saying to some children, yeah, you're capable. Your teachers have made you capable, but we're going to handicap you a little bit more. Well, state, send me an email about that.
Those conversations regarding IEPs have been happening from the beginning of the year with families, and those are that's something that we have, again, tried to do collaboratively. And certainly decoding issues, and for example, students that are blind, for the most part, are the ones that you're permitted to do the read aloud on. So I want to be very specific about that. Decoding issues and students that are blind. Beyond that, it's a very small number of students that have qualified, more so than in years past. Yes. Mhm.
And so, does a person really read it aloud to them, or is it read by the computer?
It can go either way. You can actually do a computer-based test with a human reader,
Right?
or you can have the computer do the text-to-speech. So there's a lot of variety. And so that's why those discussions are individual, and we're having those with families, with the principal, special education coordinator, the parents there, and sometimes the student, to see what's going to be best. And that, of course, is not a 5-minute conversation. You know, there's a lot of time that's put into those discussions to make sure that we're providing the students what they need to the best of our ability.
And I get that. Here's one thing just a statement that I'm very concerned about. Transferring information from the computer to a piece of paper and then transferring it back. When they have scratch paper to work out the math problem, they can't use the scratch pad on the computer. Is that true? Because if you pull down on the computer, there's a scratch pad, is what I was shown. But now, while the kids are taking the test, they have to transfer the information to a piece of paper, right? The problem?
They're given pieces of paper to work on, to work those problems out, yes.
But they can't do that on the computer right there where they could maybe cut and paste it or copy it?
Within a given problem, there are a variety of tools that students can use. We found students are not having an issue with going from the computer to the paper, back to the computer as they work through those problems. But some students are choosing to use scratch pads or whatever is within that particular program that enables them to do that.
Okay, and they can copy it if there's...
Yes, there's cut and paste, there's different things, yes.
Okay, because that's a big one for me. Can you...
You know, and the other one, you know, like there's answer masking where you can hide, like once you go through a problem, and if you say, you know, that particular answer you don't want, you can mask it. In other words, you can hide it, in other words. You can highlight, for example, like you would on a regular
Right, I
paper-based
saw that.
test. So there's a number of features that students can use.
I just know with the kids that I work with, they could not do that. So that's why that is one thing that sticks out and really concerns me. The 18 points, so I'll bring my own daughter into it. She's going in freshman year. She has 6 points already. So probably by the end of next year, she'll have her 18 points. What does that mean?
Well, you have to take the 7 tests.
Right?
And it's a cumulative of 18 points. And it isn't like students can graduate with honors points or whatever, okay? So in other words, families need to know at this point, and I say at this point because
Right,
you know,
it could change.
you don't know, but at this point, students have to have a cumulative of they have to have at least 18 points in order to graduate.
I'm just
But
thinking...
those have to be distributed across particular, so that
English.
they construct it so you can't do 15 points in math and 3 in something
Okay,
else.
that's what I was
It-
looking
It has
for.
to be distributed. I've forgotten exact. You remember the ratios? I don't remember them off the top of my head.
Scott?
Yeah, we'll have to look that one up.
I think it's 6 points for English, 6 points for mathematics, and
Not 666, is it?
no, it's not. I knew you were going to go there, Pastor. I think I don't want to say something that I don't know specifically, but there is like English, you have to have, I believe it's 6 points, mathematics at 6 points, and then in science and social studies, it has to, I think it's maybe 3 points each, maybe, or
Okay.
don't quote me on that, but,
Okay, that makes sense.
okay? And that's what gives you the 18. Because if my math was, that did get to 18.
How will the essays be graded and by whom?
The essays, just like the Ohio Achievement Assessment, it goes to the testing company. And from my understanding of what has taken place will be the case with Pearson. They will hire people to come in and read. They'll train them. You have a rubric to be able to assess that. So who they are, the testing companies, and that's always been the case with our short answer and extended responses with testing companies.
And I just think it would
Then
be...
they also try to train them for inter-rater reliability. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into that.
Okay. And I think it would be good for the public to hear the relationship with Park and Pearson. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, Pearson is the test company that developed the English language arts and mathematics assessments for the Park Consortium. And the Park Consortium is a consortium of multiple states. So
Okay.
The answer is 4 points in math, 4 points in English, 6 points across science and social studies,
there you go.
Okay.
according to the ODE website.
And we might want to say that because I've already heard kids talking about this.
Yeah, it's 4 points in
Not
math,
mine.
4 points in English. So they must earn a minimum of 4 points in math, 4 points in English, 6 points. Now, if you do your math right, that's only 14 of the 18. So you got to pick up 4 more from something. Okay? But that's the minimum standard. So, yeah, they shut off all the escape valves.
Okay. Scott, thank you so much for all your hard work, and
Bet.
we really appreciate it. And I loved your comment the other day because I was feeling really bad about the tests and how the kids are guinea pigs, and your comment back was they're not guinea pigs, they're pioneers. We need to look at it that way. And I told my little pioneer as he walked out the door this morning, and it was funny, he came in and said, I said, how'd the test go? And he said, yeah, it was easy. He said there were 12 questions, 80 minutes. He said, I got done really quick. So he said, I made up problems in my head. He said, each question should have taken me 6 minutes and 40 seconds to add. I mean, he kept going. I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, so you think you did well? Yeah. So thank you very much.
You do learn from students, and at Charrington Elementary, I happened to discover that when I called called a group of kids pioneers, and I called another one a guinea pig, and the kid said, I ain't no guinea pig. And I immediately thought to myself, that kid was right. So thank you. Yes, we are pioneers.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Dr. Kellogg, you want to?
I think that's plenty.
I think that's plenty. Okay, moving on to public comments, and we do not have any tonight. Financials, 7.1, a resolution to approve financial reports and investments as of January 31st, 2015. The financial report lists all the funds ending January 2015. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second?
Thank you. Bart, do you want to talk to us about this?
Sure. Madam President, members of the board, this is the report for ending January 2015. For general fund, our year-to-date receipts are $92.9 million. Our year-to-date expenditures is $82.4 million. We have an unencumbered fund balance in the general fund of $45.4 million. If you look at all funds, we have a year-to-date receipts of $124.6 million. Our year-to-date expenditures is $120.1 million, and an unencumbered fund balance of $53.9 million for all funds. And that's as of January.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none. You want to call the roll?
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Dr. French,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. 7.02, amended resolution accepting the amounts and rates determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Bart, do you want to talk about this too?
Madam President, members of the board, this is the resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor. Every year, we do a tax budget, which lets the county know what our bond expenditures are, our general fund. We give them all the numbers, and then based on the valuation, they set the rates so that for taxes for going for next year, not this current year, but for next year. So this is a report that we actually receive from the Franklin County Auditor's Office every year. We do this about the same time every year. It's usually February, March. But this is a report from them that basically is setting the rates for the next calendar year. And it's really, like I said, it's provided to us by the county.
Okay. Any questions? Hearing none.
Excuse me, Dr. French,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. Moving on to the personnel consent agenda. If everyone doesn't mind, I'm going to bundle these, 8.01 to 8.11, and I'm going to ask Gary to come up and talk to us about this.
Good evening, Madam
Oh,
President.
I need a motion. Don't say it.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Gary,
We ready?
ready. You caught me off guard.
On the consent agenda tonight, there are 11 sections, and 74 persons are listed within those 11 sections. In section 8.01 and 8.02, there are 6 resignations, both classified and licensed. Section 8.03, there are 10 retirements of licensed staff members. Section 8.04, there are 4 contractual changes of classified staff members. In point 05 and point 06, there are 10 requests for leave of absence for licensed and classified staff members. Point 807, there's 1 change of assignment for a classified staff member. And in 8.08, there's 1 change of assignment for a licensed administrator, and Dr. Kellogg will address that when I'm finished. 8.09, one-time payments for kindergarten 101. That's been discussed tonight, and that event will occur on March the 10th. 8.10, there are 5 employments of classified staff members. And in the last section, there are 35 recommended employments. Most of these are supplemental contracts for spring activities, spring sports. And then there's 1 addition to the homebound tutor list. And again, we keep that list current, and those people are as needed. And we have a fairly significant list of people who volunteer to do that. And they go to the home of the students that are homebound, so to speak, and they work with them. And quite often, the teacher has the student in class, and so they get on the list, and they're willing to go to the home and, you know, work with the kids and so forth. So, questions?
No?
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Bart?
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. French,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes.
Before you move on, so just part of that, we'd like to take a moment to recognize Lori Lofton. Lori will be taking over the reins that Gary's yielded in his hands for the last couple of months. We appreciate the work he's done. He won't be disappearing too quickly, just moving to the background more, and Lori will be coming to the forefront. So she's been with us, of course, all this year. We're looking forward to her leadership. She provides a lot of expertise and a lot of background experience, wise enough to come to us from ODE, and I was bought with her. I'm sorry, that was kind of a cheap shot, wasn't that, Lori? I'm sorry. We're excited to have her as part of the team, and looking forward to the leadership she's going to provide there. So you have that. That's one of the things you acted on tonight. So we welcome her in her new role.
I did hear her say, though, that she's not going to give Gary Mondays off, though.
What?
Giving Gary every 5th Friday of the month off.
Every 5th Friday.
Welcome. Well, thank you.
Yes, welcome.
Welcome, Lori. But I got to say, you have really a tough place to step into, because Gary has done just an incredible job stepping in after Kurt's loss. I don't have a doubt in the world that you're going to continue on that trajectory of excellence that Gary has been on. But Gary, thank you very much.
Okay, let's move on. Number 9, policy consent, we have none. 10.01, recommended action, we have none. Recommended new action, 11.01, we have none. Recommended action, 12.01, resolution to authorize the purchase of competitive retail natural gas from the Direct Energy Business Marketing LLC. May I have a motion?
So move.
And a second?
Second.
And then is Mr. LaRose going to come talk to us?
Thank you. Members of the board, in 2012, the board approved participation in the MEC's natural gas program that ends June 30th of this year. And in preparation for the next term, the MEC has publicly bid natural gas service for a 2-year period effective July of this year through June of 2017. 5 bids were received, with Direct Energy providing the lowest cost for moving the physical supply of natural gas across the utility pipeline. Direct Energy's bid is 5 cents per MMBTU for FY16 and 3.5 cents for FY17. Our current contract expires in June. That expires in June is 31 cents per MMBTU. If we do not select a supplier, we default to Columbia Gas's standard choice offer rate of $1.40 for FY16 and $1.29 for FY17. Direct Energy's bid is a 2-year savings of approximately $48,000 as compared to the current agreement, and a savings of approximately $234,000 as compared to Columbia's standard choice offer. We are recommending that the board authorize the ratification of the sales and service agreement with Direct Energy that is included with this resolution through the MEC.
That's a tough one to argue with.
That's good.
Well, and I guess from a liaison standpoint, I'd add, I had an opportunity to review this change in this contract agreement, have some professional experience with the costs of transportation. A couple of things that I like about this: transportation of the natural gas through these pipelines, which if you look at your own utility bills, you'll always see a cost for generation and you'll see a cost for transportation as separate. It's the same with government entities. I think this was great news, a great multi-year save. I agree, it's a no-brainer, but at least from the standpoint of due diligence, even looking through the materials, looks like a very good situation for the school district for the next couple of years. So,
Great. Anybody else? Mr. Griffin?
Mr. Byrd?
yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Dr. French?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. Up next, we have public comments, 13.01, and we have none. So we're on to board comments, 14.01. Would anyone like to speak?
I'm going to pass.
I've said enough.
I have just a bit more of board liaison responsibilities. We've talked quite a bit with this board about making sure that we close the loop. A lot of times things get talked about in prior board meetings, and we don't necessarily put a finishing touch on updates that have been given in the past. And there's one in particular that comes to mind. Mr. LaRosa made a update to the board a number of meetings ago about an expectation of a rebate for lighting programs through Westerville Electric. I'm very happy to say that I was able to see that rebate in the amount of about $62,422.12. And it was nice to see it. It was good to see that our work efforts in the operations area and facilities and operations area of the administration is yielding results. It was nice to see the tangible outcome of that, and really appreciate what the staff does. Also had an opportunity from a liaison responsibility or standpoint to participate in meetings last week around Point View. The administration energy and excitement about this project is growing, and it was really great to see the cooperation and collaboration between all the different parties as we're talking about not just the structure itself, but how we accommodating classes, how are we getting ahead of the game, to reconfigure the space while being able to meet the needs of both the students and the administrators in that facility. So again, very productive session from a facilities and operations standpoint. Even had Bob Line from transportation at the table, just to make sure that if there were going to be transportation needs in our planning for that project, that they were accounted for as well. So great team effort. Again, always great to be able to put an exclamation point on a prior statement, so it's good to see that check. And, it's good to get moving on Point View.
I want to give a shout out to Barbara Wallace. publicly and say thank you for coming to Parent Council last week and presenting the all-day kindergarten forms, registration forms to the group. I've heard so much feedback and positive feedback, and I really appreciate that. It was good stuff. Lori, I look forward to working with you. That is my liaison position, so we will get together soon. Feeling some girl power here. I like it. So next, 15.01, the next Board of Education meetings will meet here at the Early Learning Center, March 9th and 23rd at 6 p.m. And with that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
And do you want to call the roll?
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Dr. French,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. We're adjourned.